Welcome to those of you who are online. Shabbat Shalom to you too. Thank you to Sydney, who is our tech person tonight. Is going to enable all of you over there to enjoy. If you're just walking in, you might want to go to the back and pick up a prayer book. We'll just do a little welcoming song. A few of us are new here today, first time in these doors, so let's sing together, Hine Matov. Hine Matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. So I hope that you all got a prayer book when you came in, yes? If so, I invite you to turn to page 636 in the back of the prayer book, and we'll start with a few words of hope and invocation. 6 lines up in the bottom, the beginning of the last verse. We're going to sing Higalena, Ufros chavivi alai, et sukat shlomecha. Reveal yourself, speaking to the divine and speaking to the holy in the world. And spread, O my friend, over me, the sukkah, the tabernacle of your peace. It goes like this. Higale, gale, gale, na, ufros, ufros, chavivi alai, et sukkah, sukkah, shlomecha. That's the whole thing, you can do it. Higale, gale, gale, na, ufros, ufros, chavivi alai, et sukkah, sukkah, shlomecha. Now, two new people came in, and they don't know we're on page 636, the last verse, 6 lines up from the bottom. So let's do it again. Gale, 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 na, ufros, ufros, chavivi alai, et sukkah, sukkah, shlomecha. So we're asking for some peace to come into the world, to come into our hearts, to come into this place. Gale, 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 na, ufros, ufros, chavivi alai, et sukkah, sukkah, shlomecha. So we're going to turn back to page 120 to light our Shabbat candles. I want to invite Amy to come forward and light our candles tonight, after which we'll just pour ourselves into a quick Shabbat Shalom. The words to this are pretty simple. Shabbat Shalom u'mevorach. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom u'mevorach. Shabbat Shalom u'mevorach. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. So I invite us to turn to page 142 to sing Shalom Aleichem. And remind us that there are 4 verses here. When the Sabbath arrives, sometimes it catches us by surprise. So first thing we say is, Shalom Aleichem. Hello, how are you? Welcome. And then we say, Barchuni, Boachem L'Shalom. We invite something of the angels of peace to enter into our life. And then we ask, Barchuni L'Shalom. Just give me a small blessing. And then we sing, Tzeitchem L'Shalom. Go on your way and spread the Sabbath blessing all over the world. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem L'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamalachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Barchuni L'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzidchem L'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We move back to page 138. We'll sing L'Chadodi to welcome the Sabbath as a sacred presence. I'm going to invite us, before we sing Lachadodi, to just take a minute to center ourselves. That means just, if you want, put your feet on the ground and sit up a little more in your place and feel yourself supported by the chair that you're on or the pew that you're on. And if you want to close your eyes, just take a few moments to take a few deep breaths and maybe just let go of whatever came in here with you that you want to let go of from the week, or maybe take into you some good stuff from the week that you want to bring into Shabbat. And then we'll sing Lachadodi together. So we're going to sing verses 1 and 2, and number 8 and number 9 on the bottom of page 139, beginning at the top of page 138. And our custom is on the last verse, is to rise and face the. Is that somebody's phone? To rise and to face the door, and to give a deep bow as we imagine that Sabbath spirit that we hope is already part of our breath will enter the room. Lecha dodi likrat kala, nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor v'dibur echad, השמיענו אל המיוחד, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ולתפארת בתחילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי מקור הברכה. מראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. Verse 8. ימין ושמאל תפרוצי, ואת אדוני תעריצי. על יד איש בן פרצי, ונשמחה ונגילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. We rise and we face the door. בואי בשלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה. וחדודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לחדודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. We remain standing and turn to page 146 for the formal call to prayer. Baruch hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. You may be seated. How about if we read together in the English on the top of page 149? Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai ha'ma'ariv aravim. Page 150. Ahavat olam. Sorry, wrong key. Beit Israel. Amcha ahavta. Amcha ahavta. Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, otanu limadeta. Al kein Adonai Eloheinu b'shachvenu v'kumenu nasiach b'chukecha. ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. והם חיינו באורך ימינו, ובהם נהגה יומם ולילה, נהגה יומם ולילה. ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. Turning to page 152. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. On page 154, we'll sing together the V'ahavta. We'll chant it in the Hebrew first, and then we'll read together in the English in the middle of the page. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך. We read together You shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day. Impress them upon your children. Recite them when you stay at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand, and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Thus you shall remember to observe all my commandments and to be holy to your God. I am Adonai your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am Adonai your God. Adonai Elohechem, Amen. Turn to page 158. I'm going to sing Mi Chamocha, this song of praise, song of rejoicing. I don't know if you all know this melody, but we'll do it on La one time through just to make sure. Ya da 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 da, ya 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 da da da, ya da da da, ya da 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 da. Ya da da da, ya da da da, ya da 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 da. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha ne'edar b'kodesh. Mi chamocha ne'elim Adonai, mi chamocha ne'edar b'kodesh. Nora tehilot. Oh, say, fele, no ratilot. Oh, say, fele, ya da 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 da, ya da 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 da, ya da 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 da, ya da 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 da. Ya da da da, ya da da da, ya da 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 da, ya da da da, ya da da da, ya da 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 da. If you'll turn to page 161 and 160. I don't know how many of you on Zoom are new tonight, but I know there's at least 3 or 4 or maybe 5 people who are here for the first time tonight in our congregation, so I want to welcome you all and hope that we get a chance to meet you a little bit at the Oneg after the service. I wonder if how many will know this version of what we call Let There Be Love. We sing on the top of page 161, just the first 2 lines, Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. And then we jump back to the top of page 160 and just sing the first line in the Hebrew. So let's try it. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu. Hashkivenu Shalom, Hashkivenu, Adonai Eloheinu, Hashkivenu, Shalom. We'll go down to the bottom of the page and do the seal for this blessing. Baruch atah אתה אדוני הפורס סוכת שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל, ועל ירושלים ועל כל עמו, ועל ירושלים שלום. ברוך אתה אדוני הפורס סוכת שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל, שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל. And on the next page, 162. The people of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, observing it in every age as a covenant for all time. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי 6 ימים עשה אדוני, עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש, שבת ויהי נפש, שבת ויהי נפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. So we come to page 164. It is the Amidah, the standing prayer. In just a moment, I'll invite you to stand and to rise. We're going to just do the invocation to this prayer, the very first line at the top of the page, that verse from the Psalms that invites God's help to help us find the words in our mouth or in our hearts to utter words of prayer. Once we sing that together, we'll go back into the silence. We'll allow a few minutes just for standing silence. And in the silence, I invite you to either use the words in the prayer book or read some of the poems or just experience the standing and just use this time as a private time for prayer. And when you've finished your own private prayer, I invite you to take your seats again. So I invite you to rise on page 164. שפתי תפתח, ופי יגיד, ופי יגיד תהילתך. שפתי תפתח, ופי יגיד, ופי יגיד תהילתך. אדוני שפתי תפתח, Ufiya ki tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. So at the bottom of page 180, please join me in these words, these prayers for peace. Peace in this room, peace in the city, peace in the world. Oh, say shalom b'myomah. Oh, yaseh shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. Ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. Ve'imru. Amen. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Oh, say shalom b'myomah. Oh, yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru Amen. So now, having prayed together a little bit, we want to offer a prayer of healing, a Misha Berach. If you have in mind a person for whom we can pray for their healing and you wish to mention their name, please do so when I pass my hand around the room. So we'll sing the Misha Berach. If you need the words, they're way back on page 109. Misha Berach Avoteinu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Mishaberach imotenu Mekor HaBracha Lavotein. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shelema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen. So some of you are here for the first time. Maybe some of you are in Charlottesville for only a couple days, I understand. But those of us who are here in Charlottesville, this is sort of a notable weekend and a notable day. It's exactly 6 years to the day from August 11th, 2017, when this community went through a really horrific experience with the coming of the Unite the Right rally to town, and the mayhem and murder, actually, that followed. Tomorrow, the CCC, which is the Charlottesville Clergy Collective, is going to hold a community conversation at the Carver Rec Center at Jefferson Street, Jefferson School African American Center, as an occasion for reflection on how to move forward in our own community in achieving racial justice, more equity, and even perhaps reparation that those who came here with the Unite the Right came here to forcefully reject. They came here because this city took a very tentative step forward in removing the statues of Confederate generals from our public parks, because we wanted to put a different space on our public spaces, different face, and because we wanted to recognize that the need to change some of the ways that our city, and not just its parks and monuments, have been deformed and defaced by centuries of structural racism. The appearance here, representing this violent vanguard of the backlash against even such tentative and symbolic progress, reminded us that there's a large and vocal and organized segment of our country that does and will resist these changes. Those who want to turn the clock back, who interpret progress towards equity and equality for people of color, for women, for the recognition of rights of LGBTQ people as a kind of persecution, as something that's been taken away from them. Our city, for understandable reasons, for anybody who was here on that day, does not formally mark this anniversary. But our clergy collective does. And in our discussions, we decided that the focus of our conversation this year would not be focused on the past, on the violent events that took place right outside this building, but rather on the future. We decided it was time to turn this anniversary in our congregations and in our communities into a time of reflection. Perhaps it could be an annual self-checkup to talk and see how much progress we have actually made towards some of those goals that seem to have aroused the anger of the alt-right, like telling more truth about the uncomfortable aspects of our history, including not just the history, but also the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow and segregation, both in our schools and in our public spaces. To talk about the allocation of resources to historically disadvantaged communities. To take seriously the crisis of affordable housing that disproportionately affects city residents, and especially people of color, to reducing some of the disparities in healthcare access and outcomes, to closing the educational and achievement gaps in our school, and more. And if you do decide to join us tomorrow, and you do have to sign up, but you can still come. Don't tell anybody I said so, even if you didn't sign up. I thought we'd think a little bit and perhaps even share outside or begin to think, if you're going to join us, about some of the questions that we're going to be bringing to the table, i.e., what resources do we have in our own community, in our synagogues, churches, with our friends, work, that can be leveraged together towards moving our city forward towards a more just and equitable future. But for this Jewish community, there's a second way, of course, in which the Unite the Right rally affected and impacted us. I think it's safe to say that the Unite the Right and appearance here brought about a sea change in the way that we thought about and understood anti-Semitism in America. I think probably before August 2017, almost every one of us, Jewish people at least, had some personal experience of anti-Jewish bias or prejudice, sometimes in the form of nasty remarks, general disdain for Judaism or Jewish culture, and sometimes even more commonly, unflattering misunderstandings about Judaism. But I don't think that any of us maybe imagined that this old and pernicious theory, this belief in an international, worldwide Jewish conspiracy along the lines of the notorious protocols of the Elders of Zion, would seriously be taken serious by any people today. And we did not know or understand how much this belief that there was and is an organized cabal of Jewish people manipulating world events for their own advantage was at the very center of white supremacist ideology. I myself didn't understand this connection in August of 2017, even though I had spent a lot of time on the dark web. And it was only in the next few months, as I began to read more and talk to people, that I at least began to realize how central was the role that anti-Semitism plays in the white supremacist worldview. How it lays the blame for all the things they perceive as negative. Advances made in civil rights, the larger inclusion of African Americans in society, as well as the advancement of women's rights and the increase in immigration of people of color, etc. It claims that all these changes were brought about and coordinated and orchestrated by Jews in Jewry, in Hollywood, in politics, on Wall Street and international finance, and by the Zionist manipulation of American domestic and foreign policy. And that's the reason why so many of them who came here to oppose the removal of the statue of Robert E. Lee came carrying and wearing neo-Nazi signs and emblems. If you had asked me then whether in 6 years people would still be promoting such crackpot theories, once they were brought into the open and exposed to the light of air again for a reasonable discourse, I probably would have said no, but I would have been wrong. Because 6 years since then, these ideas have inspired more violence. They were espoused by the man who murdered 11 people at Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh a year later, in the belief that Jews were behind the flood of immigrants that was ruining our country. And it's worthwhile remembering that the man who in January 2022 flew all the way from London to Colleyville, Texas, where he talked his way into a synagogue and then held the congregation hostage, insisted that the rabbi, Charlie Citron Walker, make a phone call to Angela Buchdahl, who is the senior rabbi of Central Synagogue in New York City. He did so because he was certain that since she was the head rabbi of the largest, or one of the largest synagogues in New York City, she would be able to pick up the phone to Joe Biden or whoever else. I guess it was Trump at the time. And immediately secure the release of a colleague who was imprisoned in a nearby Texas penitentiary. And that doesn't even include personalities mentally imbalanced as they may be, like Kanye West, who blame all their self-inflicted wounds on Jewish enemies and vowing in the most public way to go DEFCON 3 on the Jewish people. It's even more sobering to note the extensive reach of conspiracy theories like QAnon, which also peddles in such theories, sometimes directly and sometimes by implication, and whose adherents have been elected by American citizens to the halls of Congress, some of whom now sit close to the ear and agenda of the Speaker of the House of Representatives. So it's important to understand where this comes from and maybe how to counter it and to fight against it. A few months ago, Yair Rosenberg, who writes for The Atlantic magazine, was invited to testify before a Foreign Affairs Committee in the Congress, a hearing dedicated to, quote, responding to anti-Semitism and anti-Israel bias. And I want to share some of his remarks here because I think they're worth hearing. He says the stories that we tell about anti-Semitism and where it comes from are too narrow and convenient. For some people, talking about anti-Jewish prejudice understandably means talking about neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and the far right. For others, it means talking about anti-Israel sentiment that too often lapses into anti-Semitism. These narratives dominate the discourse because they contain real truth, but also because they are easy for partisans to tell about their ideological opponents. But they aren't the whole story. And I'd like to tell you a different one, he says, because until we challenge the comfortable conversations about anti-Semitism, we're unlikely to impact the problem. And he says the story goes like this. For almost as long as there have been Jewish people, there has been anti-Jewish prejudice. It's a bigotry that predates the United States of America and the modern state of Israel. It's older than capitalism and communism, Republicans and Democrats. It precedes Christianity and Islam. And because of this, while anti-Semitism may be expressed by these communities, it cannot be caused by them. And the source of the cause is something more fundamental. And he says it's today expressed in ways that are designed to evade our defenses. Today, he says, few people would fall for the bald claim that, quote, the Jews control our politics and economy. But just substitute George Soros or the Rothschilds or the Zionists or Israel, and suddenly the anti-Semitic argument regains its appeal, and respectable people and institutions start nodding their heads and suggesting we ought to have a conversation on the topic. The notion that Jews control the weather might sound bizarre to your ears, space lasers aside, but the idea that Israel controls the media, something that Pakistan's foreign minister claimed on CNN in 2021, might not. And because people have long been conditioned to think about Jews in an underhanded fashion, it doesn't take much to update the ancient conspiracy theory to persuade contemporary audiences. And thanks to centuries of material that can be found blaming the world's problems on its Jews, conspiracy theorists seeking a scapegoat for their sorrows inevitably discover that the invisible hand of oppression belongs to an invisible Jew. So if Rosenberg is right, then perhaps one way of confronting anti-Semitism, even if it is a slow and a roundabout way, is to take a direct aim at the kind of crude and conspiratorial thinking that he's talking about here, and to call it out whenever we see it, to insist when we talk on the complexity of problems, to resist generalizations in the language of identity categories, the Jews, the blacks, the immigrants, we white people, we Americans, on which all conspiracy theories thrive. There's also a debate in the Jewish community over whether anti-Semitism can be effectively combated by legislation. I'm not sure that everyone knows. I didn't know till I checked it today. that the Virginia Public Procurement Act was introduced in January of 2023 to our state legislature and is now pending. It would prohibit public bodies from entering into a contract in excess of $100,000 with any contractor having more than 10 employees that boycotts Israel. The bill is problematic from at least 2 points of view. The first is whether such actions by the movement or others called BDS, which I personally do not support, but whether it can be defended as free speech and legitimate political organizing. And the second objection is more important and perhaps broader, since the underlying rationale for all these bills and other such bills is that certain kinds of anti-Israel speech and actions are anti-Semitic. But even among Jews, or maybe especially among Jews, there's a large and legitimate disagreement over the precise definition of anti-Semitism. Not to mention the question of where to draw the line between ignorant or misinformed speech and legally prosecutable hate speech. Or what is the quality, what is the nature of the speech when criticism of Israel, about which, let's face it, there's indeed much to criticize, becomes anti-Semitism. And last week, a jury in Pittsburgh convicted a man of murder in the shooting of 11 congregants at the Tree of Life Synagogue in 2018. I think everybody in this room is grateful at the outcome of that trial. But in the sentencing phase of the trial, partially in response to the call on the part of some of the families of the victims, he was sentenced to death. It's the first federal death sentence to take place under the Biden administration, which currently has a moratorium on all executions. So it's not clear whether it will ever be carried out. But just last week, Rabbi Sharon Brous of Ikar in Los Angeles wrote a very passionate protest to this that I want to share with you by means of conclusion. Not only because of her rejection on principle of the justice of the death penalty, but also because of what she says about the way that we can affirm the value of Jewish life in the face of threats to it. Here's what she wrote. Many argued that anything less than the death penalty for the perpetrator of that massacre would have signaled to the world that Jewish lives are worthless. But there is no justice in the death sentence. Taking the life of a murderer does not preclude future murders. The death penalty has never been shown to deter crime. Killing this killer does not protect us from future anti-Semitic acts. Only our vigilance, our love, and our stubborn, persistent engagement with the world can protect us. And let us be clear, killing a killer does not prove that Jewish lives have value. It's our Jewish joy, our Jewish vitality, our Shabbat dinners and B'nai Mitzvah, our Jewish writing and comedy and art, our Jewish chutzpah, the chutzpah even of our continued existence, and the Jewish call to justice. These are the greatest testaments to how much Jewish lives matter. And even as we cry out against the poison of anti-Semitism and white supremacy, which is paired with easy access to military-grade weapons and an ecosystem of hate that fuels the worst in us, we must affirm that there's no justice in answering violence with more violence, and that no healing will come from more death. Healing is possible only when we stubbornly insist on living the kind of Jewish life, joyous and just, that no one can ever take from us. Shabbat Shalom. So I want us to begin to conclude with the Aleinu, which is on page 586. and we rise. We are in the middle of the page. Aleinu shabeach ladon hakol, latet geula liotzer bereshit, shelo asanu kegoyei ha'aratzot, velo samanu kemishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, וגור עלינו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. In the middle of page 591. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו We come now to the Mourner's Kaddish on page 598. I'm going to read the names of those in our congregation for whom we're observing Yahrzeit this week. Goldie Alexander and Eve Becker, Sidney Cohen, Howard Diamond, Nancy Diamond, Howard Dreiser, Charles Dress, Nathan Feinstein, Betty Fowler, Jeff Fowler, William Hirschfeld, Bernard Kahn, Isaac Mizrahi, Natalie Queen, Carolyn Rebson, Helen Rothberg, Harvey Rothberg Jr., Gerald Roseanne, Frank Razut, Richard Skalak, Dina Ruth York, Ralph Eisenberg, Joseph Klugerman, and Annie Peltz. So those of you who are observing periods of mourning, or anyone who wishes to join the mourners, is invited to rise for the Mourner's Kaddish on page 598. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, b'agala uv'zman kari v'imru, Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach leolam leolmei almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei lekudisha le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran v'alma v'imru Yehei shlamar Rabba min Shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Oseh shalom b'mrumav hu yaseh shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru. Amen. We ask the source of peace to send peace to those who mourn, and we all say Amen. So tomorrow morning, there is at 10 o'clock a traditional egalitarian minyan here. If this kind of service with the guitar wasn't to your liking, you can come tomorrow. There won't be any guitar. We'll use a different prayer book, all different stuff. Also tomorrow at 2 p.m., as I mentioned, moving beyond August 12th together, that community conversation takes place at the Jefferson School at 2 p.m., and you should probably register just so they know how many more chairs. They borrowed 30 chairs from CBI today. I think that should cover a little bit of overflow. Also, I'm going to abuse my power up here on the pulpit and invite those of you who perhaps are shy, since we do have a lot of people who are new in the congregation. Maybe before we go out there, if this is your first time or second time, or if you feel like you want to introduce yourself, I invite you to do so now and kind of say where you're from. So can I call on the Air Force there? Great. Welcome. Welcome. Thanks. Anyone else? From Miami. From Miami. Wonderful. Anybody else want to introduce yourselves? Vivian? Great. Anybody else want to introduce themselves? Last night, you said? Oh, last Friday. It's almost last night. From where? From New York. And did you say Gabby? T. Great. Well, I hope everybody will. And, Brad, you're fairly new. I mean, go ahead and introduce yourself. Great. So you're in luck because tonight there's a little extra food at our Oneg Shabbat. So as soon as we sing our concluding song, I invite you all to go out there. We'll gather around the table. Everyone can take a little bit of wine or juice for the Kiddush. If you need the words to the Kiddush, the transliteration, there are little cards that you can take that'll help you with the singing or refresh your memory. And then I hope people will hang around a little bit, introduce one another, and say hello. So our concluding song is going to be, how about if we go to page 631? This might be something that you are familiar with where you come from, or maybe not. It's a version of Ein Kelohenu, but in Ladino. That is, it's in both Hebrew and, did I say 631? That's wrong. Sorry. Yes, page 631. It's Ein Kelohenu is a very common tune. Everybody knows what they think is the only tune. It's probably a German drinking melody from the 14th century. But this is a version both in Hebrew and in Ladino. Ladino is the language of the Jews of the Sephardic diaspora. And the same words that we're going to sing in the Hebrew, we're going to sing in the Ladino. So let's try it. Ein Kelohenu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kemoshienu, non como nuestro Dios, non como nuestro Señor, non como nuestro Rey, non como nuestro Salvador. That's all. Mi Kelohenu, mi Chadonenu, mi Chemalkeinu, mi Kemoshienu, ken como nuestro Dios, ken como nuestro Señor, ken como nuestro Rey, ken como nuestro Salvador. No del Eloheinu, no del Adonenu, no del Malkeinu, no del Moshiach. Lo haremos a nuestro Dios, lo haremos a nuestro Señor, lo haremos a nuestro Rey, lo haremos a nuestro Salvador. Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshiach. Bendito nuestro Dios, bendito nuestro Señor, bendito nuestro Rey, bendito nuestro Salvador. Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshiach. Tú sos nuestro Dios, tú sos nuestro Señor, tú sos nuestro Rey, tú sos nuestro Salvador. Buen sábado, a good Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom.